The woman who came back from the water. My stepmother packed the cooler herself that morning. 2 bottles of Prosecco, a wedge of imported Gouda cheese, and a tin of specialty smoked almonds she had shipped from some fancy little shop in Mobile, Alabama. She also packed a change of beneficiary forms she had gotten notarized the week before, tucked underneath a folded beach towel like it was just another piece of luggage. The boat left the marina at noon. My stepsister Brooke sat up on the bow with her big oversized sunglasses on and did not look at me once during that first hour on the water. The Gulf was flat, almost glassy, a deep green blue that my daddy would have said was sitting right around 76 degrees. By 7 that evening, I was in it. Welcome back to Still Waters Stories, where quiet women with good lawyers always get the last word. If you have not joined the family yet, hit that subscribe button right now because this one is worth staying for. But before I go any further, drop your city and the time you're watching this in the comments right now. I want to know where in the world you are as this story starts. I'll be checking. Now let me tell you exactly what happened. The first time Diane packed that cooler, my father was still alive. He had bought it at a marine supply warehouse in Beaumont, Texas in 1999, the year he expanded his inland waterway freight company from 2 barges to 6. It was a heavy-duty canvas cooler, olive green with copper clasps, and it weighed about 9 pounds empty. He used to fill it with turkey sandwiches and ice-cold Dr. Pepper and haul it with him every time he rode out to check on cargo routing along the lower Sabine River. He was hands-on like that. Always had to see a thing with his own eyes before he would believe it. When Diane came into our lives, she swapped the turkey for fancy meats and cheeses and the Dr. Pepper for sparkling wine. My father laughed about it because he loved her and because, honestly, my dad was never a man who cared much about what was in the cooler as long as the people sitting around it were happy. My father's name was Robert Calloway. He built Calloway River Freight from one beat-up second-hand barge and a handshake deal with a dock manager in Port Arthur back in 1991. By the time I was 12, the company was moving cargo up and down the intracoastal waterway between Texas and Louisiana. By the time I turned 18, we had moved into the house on Cedar Cove, a big white craftsman sitting on a bluff above the water, with a wide front porch where you could watch his barges slide by in the early morning like slow-moving islands. My mother died when I was 10. Pancreatic cancer. She was gone in 9 months. She went so fast that I spent years afterward half expecting her to walk back through the front door like she had just stepped out for groceries. My father raised me alone after that, which meant I grew up in dispatch offices, on barge decks, and in the back row of freight hearings where I did my homework while lawyers argued about liability and cargo insurance. I learned more about how this world actually works sitting in those back rows than I ever did in any classroom. He married Diane when I was 18. She was a corporate event planner from Charlotte, North Carolina, the kind of woman who could walk into a room full of strangers and make every single person feel like they had been personally expected. She had organized a big riverfront dinner for a shipping industry conference where my father was the main speaker. He told me later that she was the only event person he had ever met who did not treat him like a stage prop. She was 42 at the time. Put together, smart and warm, or so it seemed. My father had spent 30 years talking to dock workers and freight brokers and honestly had no idea how to throw a proper dinner party. Diane knew how to throw everything. She came with her daughter Brooke, who was 17 at the time. Brooke was quiet and agreeable and seemed to spend her whole life in some kind of permanent orbit around her mother, close enough to be useful, never quite given any real room to be her own person. They moved in. My father added a whole wing onto the house for them, had the work done before the summer was even over. And every year after that, he took all of us on what he called the annual bay trip. A tradition that had started when I was 12, when he chartered a 30-foot sailboat for my birthday and let me take the wheel for 15 whole minutes while he stood right behind me with his hands hovering just 2 inches above mine, never quite letting go but letting me believe he had. My father trusted 2 people with the details of his estate. Me and Frank Delgado, his attorney since before I was born, a quiet and careful man from Corpus Christi who had never once raised his voice in a courtroom because, as he liked to say, people who raise their voices have already lost the argument. My father died 2.5 years ago. Heart attack at his office desk. His right hand was on a freight routing report and his left was wrapped around a mug of coffee that was still warm when his office manager found him. That mug was the detail that got me. I kept thinking about the warmth of it. How small the gap is between here and gone. The will reading was on a Friday. Frank sat at the head of the conference table. Diane sat across from him in a black pantsuit she had clearly bought earlier that week. There was a small fold crease at the shoulder that had not been broken in yet. Brooke sat beside her, scrolling her phone. I sat across from them and stared at the framed photo of the Texas coast on the wall behind Frank's desk and tried to keep my breathing even. Frank read the papers in the order my father had arranged them. I received controlling ownership of the company through an irrevocable trust. That means a legal arrangement that cannot be changed, challenged, or taken back once it is set up. My father had created it 11 years earlier when he was 54 years old, healthy as a horse, and had just closed one of the biggest freight deals on the Gulf Coast. Frank himself managed the trust as an independent person, not tied to our family. It also included what the legal documents called a spendthrift clause, a special rule that meant no one could ever get their hands on my share of that money. Not through pressure, not through marriage, not through any court order in any state. Diane received the right to live in the Cedar Cove house for as long as she wanted. She also received a monthly payment of $14,000 from a separate account my father had set aside just for that. She received nothing else. She looked at Frank the way you look at a GPS when it tells you to turn and you realize too late it has been taking you the wrong way the entire time. "That's it?" she said. Frank closed the folder. "That is everything." Diane did not cry, did not raise her voice. She stood up, smoothed her jacket, and walked out of the office. Brooke followed. Neither of them said a single word to me. Not one. They walked out of that conference room like I was furniture they had already decided to throw away. Over the next 6 months, Diane started redecorating the house. Small things at first. New blinds in the kitchen. Different handles on the cabinets. Then bigger things. My childhood photos vanished from the staircase wall, just gone one Tuesday while I was at the office. My mother's watercolor paintings, the ones she had done at a little community art class in Beaumont the year before she got sick, were replaced with abstract prints from some online catalog. The lock on the wine storage room was changed. The lock on the cedar closet was changed. I know because I reached for my key one afternoon and it did not work anymore. I did not say a word about any of it. My father wanted her in that house, and I was going to honor that no matter what. By February, Diane had hired her own attorney. I found out because he sent a letter straight to Frank's office. Frank called me that same afternoon. He said 4 words, "She's already making moves." He explained it that evening on the phone. Diane's attorney had filed a legal challenge against my father's trust, claiming my father had not been in his right mind when he set it up, and that I had pressured him into cutting Diane out of any real money. Let me tell you just how ridiculous that claim was. My father created that trust 11 years before he died, during a period when he held an active pilot's license, had just passed a full physical, and had personally put together one of the largest freight deals in the Gulf Coast region. Any judge who looked at the timeline would throw that challenge out before their second cup of coffee. I asked Frank if we needed to be worried. "Trust is rock solid," he said. "But Savannah, I've been doing this for 42 years. When people run out of legal options, they get creative." A pause. Stay alert. The time I thought he meant to watch for more lawsuits. I should have thought much harder about what the word creative actually meant coming from Frank Delgado. Okay, I need to pause right here and ask you something. If you have ever had someone in your life put on a perfect front while secretly planning to destroy you, drop a folded hands in the comments right now. 'Cause what comes next is exactly that. And please, if you have not liked this video yet, do it now. It helps more people find this story. Here is what I noticed in the weeks that followed. Diane got warmer. She started cooking Sunday dinners. Pot roast, cornbread, sweet tea in the good glasses. She suggested a spa weekend, just the 3 of us girls, she said. Some real quality time together. She started calling me sweetheart in the hallway. She had never used a single term of warmth with me in all 8 years of living under the same roof. Not once. She started bringing me coffee every single morning. Same time, 7:15. Same mug, my father's old blue one with the Calloway Freight logo on it. She would set it on the counter and say, "Good morning, sweetheart," and then stand right there smiling until I picked it up and took a sip. Then she would leave the kitchen. I noticed the change. I just completely misread what it meant. I told myself she was finally accepting how things were. I told myself the warmth was grief finding a gentler shape. I now know exactly what it was. Every single act of kindness was a test. She was measuring, carefully, patiently, exactly how much trust she needed to build up so she could spend it all in one single afternoon on open water. There was also a woman named Patrice. She was my neighbor, lived in the yellow house 2 doors down from Cedar Cove. Patrice was 61 years old and nosy in the very best possible way, the way older Southern women get nosy when they genuinely care about the people around them. She had known my father for 15 years. She used to bring him banana bread at Christmas and argue football with him through the screen door. Patrice started noticing things before I did. She told me later, much later after everything had already happened, that she had seen an unfamiliar silver sedan parked outside the house 3 separate times on weekday mornings, sitting there for 45 minutes each time. She did not recognize the car. She wrote down the license plate on a sticky note and put it on her refrigerator because, as she put it, when something feels off, you write it down and let the Lord decide if it matters. It mattered. Mattered a great deal. In late April, Diane suggested we do the annual Bay trip. We had not done one since my father passed. She brought it up softly over Sunday pot roast, her voice gentle and almost sad. "It's been nearly 3 years since your daddy left us," she said. "Don't you think he'd want us to keep that tradition going? Just the 3 of us. A real goodbye for him." Brooke looked up from her plate when Diane said that. Something crossed her face, not quite fear, not quite guilt. It was there for half a second and then it was gone, like a cloud shadow passing over water. I said yes. I said yes because my father loved that trip more than any other tradition he ever kept. I said yes because I was not ready to let it die. I said yes because I had lived alongside Diane's polished smile for 8 years and somewhere along the way I had let myself believe that underneath it all we were still family. I should have trusted the look on Brooke's face and said no. The morning of the trip, I packed a canvas bag, sunscreen, a paperback novel I had been meaning to finish since January, and my father's compass, a brass compass he had bought in 1992 from a retired merchant captain down in New Orleans. The old man had told him, "It won't tell you where to go. It'll tell you which way you're already facing." My father carried it on every single trip after that. Since the day he died, I had kept it in my jacket pocket. At the marina, the boat was already set up and ready. Diane had gotten there early. She was standing on the dock in white wide-leg pants and a new gold watch I had not seen before. Cooler sat at her feet, packed and buckled shut. 2 crew members waited on the back deck of the boat. I did not recognize either of them. "Where's Captain Morris?" I asked. Captain Morris had run the Calloway family boat for 9 years. "Vacation," Diane said easily. "I brought in a replacement crew. They come highly recommended." 2 men nodded at me without giving their names. One was thick-built with a deep sunburn across his forearms. The other was lean and wore mirrored sunglasses that showed me the dock behind me instead of his eyes. Neither wore a uniform. Neither wore a name tag. Both had the kind of stillness about them that is not calm, it is practiced. The stillness of people who have been told exactly what they are there to do. I stepped aboard. Brooke was already up on the front deck, feet pulled under her, scrolling her phone. She did not look up. Did not say good morning. The only response I got was a tiny shift of her shoulders, the way a person adjusts when they know they are being watched and have already decided not to be the one who speaks first. Something was wrong. I felt it the way you feel a storm coming before you can see it, a change in pressure, a heaviness in the air that has too much weight to it. But I could not point to anything specific. I could not name it. So I sat down, opened my book, and told myself I was being paranoid. First 2 hours were quiet. We motored out of the harbor into open Gulf water, heading east along the coast. The sun was high, the wind was light, and the water was calm enough to see the reflection of the hull beneath us like a shadow boat following our exact path. Diane opened the Prosecco at 2 in the afternoon. Poured 3 glasses. She raised hers with a smile that had just a few too many teeth in it. To family, she said. I drank. Brooke drank. The wine was very cold and very dry. I checked the compass out of old habit. The needle pointed north. We were heading southeast along the coast toward a stretch of coves my father used to anchor in. I had been to most of them a dozen times in my life. I did not recognize the one we turned into at 6:30. We dropped anchor. The light had gone that amber gold color that makes everything look like a memory you have not made yet. Diane poured the last of the Prosecco and carried the glass over to where I was standing at the back rail, looking out at the water. Beautiful evening, she said. She stepped in close. Close enough that I could smell the cheese and wine on her breath. And then she leaned in, right next to my ear, and whispered something I will hear for the rest of my life. Say hello to the sharks for me, sweetheart. Her hand hit the center of my back before the last word left her mouth. The back rail gave, not the way a railing bends under sudden weight. The way a railing moves when the bolts holding it have been swapped out for hardware that was never designed to hold a full-grown person. Someone had planned this. Every piece of it. I went over backward. I need to stop right here. Because I know a lot of you are watching this and thinking, how did no one see this coming? How did she not know? If that is what you are thinking, please write it in the comments below. And if someone in your life has ever shown you fake kindness before pulling the rug out, I want to hear about that too. This story is for all of us. The water was not cold. That was the first thing I registered. My father's voice in the back of my head, 76 degrees. Maybe 77. The second thing I registered was the engine. Speeding up. They were not turning around. I came up through the surface. Salt water burned my nose and throat. I blinked hard and looked toward the back of the boat. It was already 40 yards away and moving farther every second. I could see Brooke standing at the rail, looking down at the spot in the water where I had just been. Not screaming. Not throwing a life ring. Not doing a single thing. She turned. Walked into the cabin. Closed the door behind her. The wake from the boat rocked me twice. Then the water went flat and silent. I was alone in the Gulf of Mexico in the early dark. Ruined phone in my back pocket. My father's compass in my front pocket. Coast was a dark line with a handful of scattered lights maybe 2 miles out. I thought about leaving the compass behind. It was heavy, all brass and glass and 30 years of magnetic north. I kept it. I still do not fully know why. Maybe because letting go of it felt like letting go of him. My father taught me to swim in the Sabine River when I was 6 years old. He told me, a Calloway who cannot swim is a liability, and I do not raise liabilities. He was not a gentle teacher. He was very thorough. He taught me distance, endurance, and what to do when your body desperately wants to panic. I started swimming toward the lights. 20 minutes in, I got a cramp in my left calf. Hard and sudden, like a fist squeezing the muscle from the inside. I rolled onto my back and floated and waited for it to ease up, staring at a sky going from deep orange to dark purple. The first stars were beginning to show. I thought about my father. I thought about him standing right behind me on that birthday sailboat when I was 12, hands hovering just above mine. I thought about Diane's voice in my ear. I thought about Brooke closing that cabin door. And then I saw a light on the water. A moving light. Low to the surface. A working boat. A voice on a loudspeaker. Hey, you in the water? Stay right where you are. We are coming to you. Captain Ray Owens, 68 years old. Desert Storm veteran turned Gulf Coast commercial fisherman. He pulled me out of the water with a boat hook and a grip that could have bent railroad steel. You fall off a party boat? He asked. Something like that, I said. Ray did not push for more. He handed me a wool blanket that smelled like diesel and fish, poured black coffee from a thermos into a tin mug, and pointed me to a bench near the wheelhouse. His boat was not a comfortable vessel. Working boat through and through, nets piled on the back, rust spots on the cleats, a radio crackling away in the cabin. But it was solid. It was above the waterline. Right then, it was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen in my life. You hurt? He said. No. You want to call somebody? Yes. Please. He handed me a satellite phone. Heavy as a brick, thick rubber antenna, the kind of phone that keeps working when everything else fails. Called Frank Delgado. He picked up on the second ring, which told me he was still at his desk at 9 in the evening on a Tuesday, which told me nothing about Frank had changed in 42 years. Savannah. I'm alive. Diane pushed me off the boat. 5 seconds of silence. I counted every one. 5 seconds is a long time for a man who has spent his career making fast, careful decisions. Where are you? He said. I looked at Ray. Ray read off his GPS coordinates in a flat, steady voice. Frank repeated them back exactly. Do not call anyone else, Frank said. Not the police, not Diane, not Brooke. Not yet. Why? 'Cause right now Diane believes you are dead. His voice was quiet and very clear. If she believes that, she will move. She will file claims. She will call her attorney. She will try to get her hands on everything she thinks is now available. And every single move she makes in the next 48 hours is documented proof of what she intended all along. I understood. My father had trusted Frank Delgado for reasons I was only now beginning to fully see. Give me 48 hours, Frank said. I will have everything we need. I handed the phone back to Ray. He was leaning against the wheelhouse door with his arms folded, not pretending he had not heard every word of it. Somebody tried to hurt you, he said. Not a question. Yes. You need to disappear for a couple of days? 2 days, I said. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I slept in worse places than this boat for longer than 2 days in the desert. Make yourself at home. He went back to the wheelhouse without another word. I sat on the bench with the blanket around my shoulders and my father's compass warm in my palm. The needle was steady. I watched the coastline lights and I did not sleep for a very long time. Here is what Frank told me 48 hours later, after his financial investigator and his private investigator, a former Texas Ranger named Celia Voss, sharp and precise and absolutely not someone you wanted looking into your business, had finished tracking every move Diane made while she believed I was at the bottom of the Gulf. The timeline was exact. Frank liked things exact. 7 in the morning the day after I went overboard, a full 12 hours after she pushed me, Diane called the Coast Guard to report me missing at sea. 12 hours. She waited half a day before she told a single soul I was gone. 7:42 in the morning. Diane called her attorney, Hargrove. 9:15. Hargrove filed an emergency request with the county court to protect estate assets on behalf of Diane as the only surviving family member. 11:30. Diane called the insurance company. This was the first of 3 calls she made that same day. And here is where I need you to really pay attention. There were 3 life insurance policies with Diane listed as the one who would collect the money. Not policies my father had taken out. Policies that Diane had secretly taken out on me over the past 16 months, using her position in the household to get the personal details she needed for the paperwork. If I was declared dead, the total payout was $4.8 million. 2 of those policies were less than 5 months old. 2 in the afternoon. A locksmith showed up at Cedar Cove and changed the lock on my father's home office, the room that held the only physical paper copies of certain trust documents Diane knew existed. 4:10 in the afternoon. Brooke posted on social media, "Please hold my family in your prayers. We are devastated." It was the first time in 8 years that Brooke had ever publicly called me family. 8 years. First time. Celia Voss documented every bit of it, the locksmith, the attorney filings, the Coast Guard timeline. Everything was photographed, logged, and time-stamped. Frank also told me something else. Something Celia had found on her own that I had not known about. Patrice, my neighbor with the sticky note on her refrigerator, had given the license plate number to Celia after seeing a neighborhood alert about my disappearance. Celia ran the plate. The silver sedan was registered to a research consultant who had been hired by a second attorney Diane had been secretly meeting with, not Hargrove but a different one who specialized entirely in fighting over trusts and estates. Diane had been quietly meeting with this second attorney for over a year. In parallel, the whole time, the probate challenge that Frank had called a waste of everybody's time? That was just the top layer. The visible layer. Underneath it, Diane had been putting together a fake addition to my father's will, what lawyers call a codicil, meaning a legal add-on to an existing will. This fake document would have made Diane a co-owner of the trust, entitled to 50% of all the money if I died. It was dated 19 months before my father passed, notarized by some third party and witnessed by 2 names Frank had never seen before. It was sloppily done. Frank said the notarization date put it on a day when my father was at a freight conference in Hamburg, Germany. His passport proved it. His travel records proved it. He was not in the country on the day this document was supposedly signed. But it existed. It was sitting in a drawer in Diane's attorney's office, waiting for the exact right moment. And the right moment was the moment I was declared dead. I sat in the back of the car Frank sent for me and watched the Gulf Coast Highway pass in the early morning light. Compass sat on the center console, catching the glow of the sunrise. I did not speak for most of the drive. Right here, before we get to the part where Savannah walks back through that front door, I need you to do 3 things. Hit that like button. Hit subscribe if you have not yet. And write in the comments, what city are you watching from and what time is it there right now? I love seeing how far these stories travel. Now keep watching because this next part is the one you've been waiting for. Plan for my return to Cedar Cove was simple. Not police first. Me first. Walk into that house while Diane was there with Frank, with the evidence, and with witnesses who could confirm what they saw. Dennis will be there, Frank told me. Dennis Calloway, my father's younger brother, who drove up from Galveston that morning after hearing about my disappearance. He would serve as family witness. And Celia would be just outside the front door. 'Cause Frank Delgado always kept a second set of eyes on everything. The house looked the same from the road. White craftsman, wide porch, the big pecan tree in the front yard that my father had planted the summer I started kindergarten. From the driveway I could see 2 changes. Porch furniture was all new, modern, slate gray, nothing that belonged to this house or to the people who built it. And my mother's rocking chair was gone. It had sat on the far left end of that porch for 20 years, white paint worn through on both armrests where she used to grip when she watched sunsets over the water. In its place was a ceramic planter. I got out of the car. Borrowed clothes, a flannel shirt 2 sizes too big, work jeans held up with a length of dock rope because Ray's boat did not have a belt that fit me. Hair stiff with salt. Hadn't showered in 2 days. I looked like exactly what I was, a woman who had been left for dead and came back anyway. I used the key my father had pressed into my palm when I turned 21. The second key, the one he said to keep somewhere no one else could find it. I used to think he meant burglars. I now understood exactly what he had meant. The front door opened. The hallway smelled like cedar from my father's old coat closet, the one Diane had never touched because she said the smell reminded her of him. It was the only honest thing she ever told me about my father. I walked through to the living room doorway. Uncle Dennis was on the sofa with a coffee mug in both hands. He saw me first. The mug stopped halfway to his mouth. He did not put it down. He did not stand up. He just looked at me with an expression I have never seen on a grown man's face before and will never forget, the look of someone watching a person walk out of a place they were not supposed to come back from. Diane was mid-sentence, talking to Dennis about flower arrangements for my memorial. She was saying something about white flowers, gardenias or lilies, something white. She turned. Her mouth was still forming the word. She saw me standing in the doorway in a borrowed flannel shirt, 2 days of salt in my hair, my father's compass in my hand. Her mouth closed. Nobody in that room spoke for approximately 8 seconds. I counted them the way my father used to count the seconds between lightning and thunder, not for accuracy, just to have something solid to hold on to. Dennis set his coffee mug down on the side table. The ceramic clicked against the wood. The top of the staircase, Brooke appeared. She saw me. She went completely still on the 4th step, both hands gripping the railing like she needed it to stay upright. I walked to my father's armchair, the big leather one that Diane had never been able to move because it weighed close to 150 pounds and no one person could budge it, and I sat down. Frank came in right behind me, carrying a manila envelope. Diane's face was doing something I had never seen it do before. It was rearranging itself in real time, scrambling to find an expression that could fit a situation she had never once planned for. "Diane," I said, "I hear you've been busy." Frank opened the envelope and placed the documents on the coffee table one by one, the way my father used to spread out his river charts, calmly, without drama, with the full understanding that every line marked has consequences. First, the 3 life insurance policies Diane had secretly taken out on me over the past 16 months. Sole beneficiary, Diane. Total payout upon my death, $4.8 million. Second, the emergency legal petition Hargrove had filed the same morning as the Coast Guard report, trying to take control of the estate before the paperwork had even dried. Third, the fake addition to my father's will, notarized on a date when my father was at a freight conference in Hamburg, Germany. His passport record said so. His hotel receipt said so. His conference badge said so. Fourth, the Coast Guard incident report. Incident time, approximately 7 in the evening. Report filed 7 the following morning. 12 hours apart. Frank set his pen on the table and clicked it shut. "Mrs. Calloway," he said, "the trust Robert established cannot be changed or broken. It has a spendthrift protection built into it. Even if Savannah had died, every single asset would have transferred to the Robert Calloway River Freight Foundation. Not to you. Not to anyone in this room." He let that sit for a moment. "The insurance claims are fraud. Codicil is forged. And the Coast Guard has been told about the 12-hour gap." Diane's face did something that took me a moment to name. It was not anger. It was not fear exactly. It was the look of a person who realizes, all at once completely, that they have burned their entire life down for something they were never going to get. The look of someone standing at the edge of a cliff they built with their own 2 hands. Dennis looked at Diane. Then he looked at the table. He did not pick up his coffee. On the staircase, Brooke started crying. She had not moved from the 4th step. Frank slid the fake codicil across the table toward Diane. "You can keep that copy," he said. "We have the original." The next 40 minutes produced 14 phone calls. Frank logged every single one. 3:14. Dennis called his wife Carol back in Galveston. I could hear Carol's voice through the phone from across the room. She said one word. Then she said it again, louder. 3:22. Carol called Diane's sister in Columbus, Ohio. That call lasted 11 minutes. 3:31. Diane's sister called Diane. Diane did not answer. She was sitting in the same chair, staring at the documents on the table like she could will them into saying something different. 3:45. Diane picked up her phone and called Hargrove. Call lasted less than 2 minutes. Whatever he told her, Diane set the phone face down on the armrest and did not touch it again. 3:52. Brooke, still sitting on that same staircase step, sent me a text message on the prepaid phone Frank had given me. I still do not know how she got that number. Frank told me later that Celia had given it to her on purpose, wanting to get Brooke's words on record. The text read, "I didn't know about the insurance policies. I swear I didn't know about any of that." 4:03. Dennis called his daughter in Houston. 4:09. His daughter called my father's longtime freight partner, a man named Avery. 4:14. Avery called Frank, who sent it to voicemail because he was standing in my living room watching a family come apart in real time and needed his full attention on the room. 4:18. Diane stood up, walked to my father's study, went inside with the key she had changed the lock to accommodate, and locked the door from the inside. That click of the lock was the only loud sound in the house all afternoon. Hargrove arrived at 4:50. Silver SUV, fancy monogram briefcase, the kind of attorney who dresses like confidence is something you put on every morning along with your tie. He walked through the front door without knocking, which told me Diane had given him a key at some point in the past year, a detail that bothered me more than it probably should have. He saw me first. Then Frank. Then the documents still spread across the coffee table. His expression shifted. Not quite surprise. More like a man watching a building he designed himself begin to lean in the wrong direction. "Mr. Hargrove," Frank said, "I think you and I should talk privately." They went into the dining room. Frank pulled the door shut. Dennis and I sat in the living room and did not speak. Through the wall I could hear Frank's voice, low, steady, reading through the evidence the way you'd read a grocery list. Just facts. Just the timeline. The notarization date that did not match the Hamburg travel records. After 12 minutes, the door opened. Hargrove came out alone. He crossed the room without looking at me or Dennis, knocked on the study door and went inside. The door closed. I could hear Diane's voice go sharp and high. Hargrove stayed low. Whatever he was telling her, every word of it was something she did not want to hear. 10 minutes later, Hargrove came out alone again. He walked to Frank. "My client is open to a discussion." Frank did not even blink. "There is nothing to discuss, Mr. Hargrove. The fraud and the forged document are criminal matters. The decision belongs to the district attorney, not to us." Hargrove looked at me, looked at the front door, picked up his briefcase. "Good evening," he said to nobody in particular, and he walked out. His headlights swept across the living room windows as he backed down the driveway. Dennis turned to me. "He just left without even talking to her?" "Yes." Dennis leaned back and rubbed both hands over his face. "Your father always said Diane had expensive taste in everything except her own judgment. It was the first thing that had almost made me smile in 3 days." Diane came out of the study 6 minutes after Hargrove left. She stood in the doorway with her chin up and her back straight, the posture she always used when she needed a room to believe she was not scared. Her hands were shaking, though. They were always the honest part of her. She looked at me and said something I had not seen coming at all. "Your father chose you over me every single day for 8 years. Even after he died, he still chose you. I was his wife and I never once came first." She did not deny what she had done. She did not say she was sorry. She stood in the frame of my father's study door, surrounded by his river maps and freight manuals, and she said what she had clearly been sitting on for a very long time. "I was 42 years old when I married your father. I had spent 20 years making other people's events beautiful, building other people's special days. I walked into this house and I thought, finally somewhere that is actually mine. And then he died and I found out I had been a long-term guest in my own home. I was always just a guest. I let her finish. I did not cut her off. Not because she deserved to be heard. but because I needed to understand fully what a person tells themselves to justify pushing someone into the ocean. She finished. She waited like she expected me to explain myself. Or argue. Or soften. I stood up. Diane, I hear what you're saying. But you had a monthly payment most people only dream about. You had a beautiful home to live in. You had a stepdaughter who kept your power on and your fridge full because her father asked her to. I paused. What you didn't have was enough. And for some people it is never enough no matter what you give them. I watched her absorb that. I watched her understand that this was not the start of a negotiation. It was the end of every conversation we were ever going to have. Dennis stared at the floor. The house was very quiet. Through the window behind Diane I could see the harbor. The first dock lights were coming on over the water. I counted them out of habit, something I had picked up from my father, who always counted them at dusk to know how many boats were still out. Airs creaked on the porch boards. Salt air moved in from the harbor. Compass was in my pocket. I did not take it out. I already knew which way I was facing. Before I keep going, I want you to pause for 1 second. Think about the people in your life who have quietly been protecting you the way Frank Delgado and Captain Ray protected Savannah. The ones you do not thank enough. Drop their first name or their role in the comments, just my attorney or my neighbor or my uncle. We do not celebrate those people enough. Now keep going because the part with the notary changes everything. The phone rang more in the next 3 days than it had in the past 3 years. My father's sister, Aunt Margene, called from Vermont. I never trusted that woman, she said, which is exactly the kind of sentence people say once it is all over and it costs them nothing to say it. But then she said, I am so sorry I was not paying closer attention, Savannah. That part one believed. Diane's brother called on the second day. He was furious and loud and absolutely certain I was making the whole thing up to get rid of his sister. I gave him about 30 seconds. Then I ended the call. Some conversations are not worth the energy. Captain Morris, the regular boat captain Diane had bumped off the trip, reached out to Frank on his own. He said Diane had called him 4 days before the trip and told him she had arranged a smaller private crew and would not be needing him. He said he had found it strange because he had run the Calloway family boat for 9 years and had never once been replaced. He was willing to testify to all of it. 2 men Diane had hired as crew had left the state within 24 hours of the incident. No employment records. No captain's licenses on file. Cash only. Celia traced one of them to a marina in Louisiana working under a different name. The other one had not been found. Real crew do not get paid in cash and vanish. Frank said that simply and directly, and he was right. Celia also followed up on the plate number Patrice had written down on that sticky note. The silver sedan belonged to a research consultant hired by Diane's secret second attorney, the one who specialized in fighting trusts, to look into the details of the Calloway estate. That consultant had parked outside Cedar Cove 3 separate times in the 4 months before the boat trip. Diane had been doing her homework on the plan while she brought me coffee and called me sweetheart every single morning. I went back to the office on day 4. My operations manager Tucker, who had worked for my father since before I finished high school, was at my office door the moment I walked in. The whole floor went quiet in that particular way rooms go quiet when something serious has happened. Tucker walked over to my desk. "We heard," he said. "What do you need?" "Quarterly freight numbers on my desk by Thursday." He looked at me the way Ray Owens had looked at me on that trawler, the expression of a person who has decided not to question how you survived, just that you did. "Thursday," he said. "You'll have it." The 30 days passed. The way weather passes, sometimes fast, sometimes slow, always moving forward. Diane packed. She did not ask for help. No one offered. She moved through Cedar Cove with cardboard boxes and packing tape, going room by room through 8 years of being Mrs. Calloway. I watched the boxes pile up in the guest wing hallway when I came home from work each evening. labeled in her handwriting, neat and careful, the writing of a woman who had spent her whole career addressing other people's wedding invitations and event programs. She took what I expected. Clothes, jewelry, the designer throw pillows she had ordered from a catalog in Asheville. She also took the Prosecco glasses from the boat, the smoked almonds tin, the guest towels she had put in the bathrooms the first month she moved in, the one she had monogrammed with a C in the corner. Everyone now understood that C was never meant to stand for Charlotte, where she was from. It always stood for Calloway, the name she had been planning to own one way or another. She was taking apart a set that was never really hers, piece by piece. On day 12, Brooke came to find me. I was in my father's study going over trust documents on the phone with Frank. Brooke knocked and waited until I waved her in. "I'm moving out," she said. "I found a studio apartment in Austin. Signed the lease on Monday." I put the phone down. "Your mother's pick?" "No." She shook her head firmly. "Mine. I found it myself." Brooke had never in all her life lived anywhere that Diane had not chosen for her. "I'm going to get a real job," she said. She held her phone out to me. On the screen was a portfolio. Interior design and brand identity work, room concepts, business logos, layout plans for small companies. It was clean, purposeful work. Kind of work that makes you feel the intelligence behind it without being told to. "My mother never let me show this to anyone," she said. "She told me Calloway women don't need to work." I scrolled through it slowly. It was genuinely good. Not just okay, actually good. The commercial space work in particular had the same quality I had always admired in my father's freight routing maps, every single element earning its place, every choice made on purpose. "That portfolio is strong," I said. "Lead with the commercial spaces. That's your best work." She looked at me, waiting for more than that. Forgiveness, maybe. Or at least some warmth. I did not have either to give her yet. What I gave her was the only thing I was sure of, an honest opinion delivered straight. That was the bridge I could build right now. Whether she crossed it was up to her. She nodded and went back upstairs. 3 weeks before the trial date, the last piece came together. Celia found the notary who had put her stamp on the fake codicil. She was 24 years old, lived in a small town about 40 miles inland, and had accepted $2,000 in cash from Diane to notarize a document she knew perfectly well had not been signed by the man whose name was on it. She cooperated completely. She had secretly recorded the entire transaction on her own phone, the cash laid out on her kitchen table, Diane's voice saying, "It's just a formality, honey, nobody is ever going to look at this twice," because from the moment Diane had contacted her, something about it had felt wrong. She had been smart enough to protect herself. That recording finished off whatever was left of Diane's legal defense. The fake codicil had been created 6 months before the boat trip. That meant Diane had been building toward this for at least half a year before she ever sat across from me at Sunday dinner and suggested we honor my father's memory with a bay trip. The warmth, the morning coffee, the spa weekends, the sweetheart, the champagne toast to family. All of it, every single bit of it, was a stage she had been quietly building around an ending she had already decided on. 6 months. She had been planning the moment she leaned in and whispered while I stood at the rail looking out at the same water she intended to leave me in. "There's a plea deal on the table," Frank told me. "Her public defender is recommending she take it." "What are they offering?" 5 to 8 years on the fraud charges. The reckless endangerment runs at the same time. She would be out in about 4 years with clean behavior. I looked at the compass sitting on my desk. "Is that fair?" Frank was quiet for a long moment. Fair would mean she understands that she tried to kill someone for money she was never going to touch. "I don't think any prison sentence teaches a person that." He paused. "But it is what the law can do." Diane took the deal on a Wednesday morning. I found out at lunch, ate the rest of my food, called Frank to say thank you, and went back to work. Some endings do not need a ceremony. They just need to be over. The sentencing hearing was short. 5 years. Parole eligible after 3. All counts running at the same time. I did not attend. Uncle Dennis did. He called me from the courthouse parking lot after, his voice flat and worn out. She looked small, he said. I did not ask him to explain. I knew exactly what he meant. Diane had always been the kind of woman who could fill a room, who rearranged the air when she walked in. In a courtroom in a county-issued jumpsuit without the house and the name and the performance and the Prosecco, she was just a 52-year-old woman who had made a choice she could not take back. Thank you for going, I said. Someone from the family should have been there, Dennis said. Even for this. I hung up and sat at my desk for a long time. I did not feel joy. I did not feel relief exactly. I felt the specific kind of emptiness that comes when you have been carrying something heavy for so long that when it is finally gone, you do not know right away what to do with the space it leaves behind. I worked until 7 that night. Cleaning crew came through. I finished the report I was in the middle of, turned off my desk lamp and drove home through the dark. The house was quiet. It had been quiet for weeks. No Diane in the kitchen. No Brooke on the stairs. No coffee on the counter at 7:15. Just rooms and furniture and the smell of cedar from my father's old closet and the sound of the harbor. I sat on the front porch in my mother's rocking chair. The harbor spread out below, dark except for the dock lights. I counted them. 8, 9, 10. All accounted for. My phone rang. Brooke. I got the job, she said. The design studio in Austin. I start on Monday. Congratulations, I said. Lead with the commercial spaces. I meant what I said, that is your strongest work. A beat. I know you don't owe me anything, Savannah. I know. Another beat. Good luck in Austin, I said. And I meant it. Not warmly, not coldly. Just straight, the way my father would have said it. Some bridges you do not build with warmth. You build them with the honest belief that the person on the other side has what it takes to cross. I hung up. The chair creaked on the porch boards. Salt air. Stars starting to come out. 6 months later, I launched the Robert Calloway River Freight Foundation. It was not something I was required to do. Trust had always listed the foundation as the place the money would go if I died. But I was alive. Trust was still in my name. I launched it because my father had quietly built it into his estate plan for a reason, and I had finally figured out what that reason was. The foundation pays for safety training for commercial fishing crews and freight workers along the Gulf Coast and the Intracoastal Waterway. Emergency procedures, equipment care, weather reading, open water survival skills. Kind of training where knowing versus not knowing is the difference between someone's father coming home at the end of the week or not. The first scholarship was named for Captain Ray Owens. Ray came to the announcement. It was held outdoors by the docks on a clear October morning, with blue and white flags and about 40 people in folding chairs. He wore his only suit, navy, slightly too big in the shoulders, like he genuinely did not care at all that it did not fit perfectly. He shook my hand with the same grip that had pulled me out of the water. Your father and I never got to meet, he said. He would have asked about your boat first, I told him. He always asked about the boat before he asked anything else. Ray smiled. First time I had ever seen him smile. It was a real good one. Frank was there too, standing near the back, leaning against a dock piling, looking like a man who has finally finished something very long and is allowing himself, just for a moment, to be tired. He was retiring the following spring. 42 years of trust law, estate work, and Calloway family business. He found me after the ceremony. Your father's last instruction to me, Frank said, was to make sure you never needed me. I looked at him. He said, the day she doesn't need you anymore, Frank, that's the day you did your job right. Later that week I drove to the cemetery. Robert Calloway. Beloved father, captain, builder. Plain granite headstone, exactly the way he wanted it. No extra decoration. Just his name, his dates, and one line he had chosen for himself years before he died. Leave the dock clean. I set the compass on the headstone. The brass caught the afternoon sun. The needle swung and steadied. Then I picked it back up. I was not done with it yet. On the drive home, I slowed down as I passed the marina where the boat still sat. White hull, dark trim, back rail replaced with solid marine-grade hardware, bolted, welded, and checked twice. Frank had arranged it personally. Someday I would take that boat out again. When the water felt like my father's water once more. Not yet. But someday. Evening came. I sat on the front porch in my mother's rocking chair. The harbor spread out the way it always had. The way it did when my mother watched it from this exact spot. The way it did when my father counted the lights at dusk. The way it would long after I am gone and somebody else sits in this same chair and looks at this same water. I took out the compass and opened it. The needle swung, that small pause it always makes when it has been moved, like it is taking a breath, getting its bearings, and then it settled north. My father said a compass does not tell you where to go. Tells you which way you are already facing. He was not talking about sailing. He was talking about knowing who you are before someone else tries to tell you. I closed the compass and put it back in my pocket. The dock lights came on one at a time, the way they always do at this hour on the Gulf Coast. 7, 8, 9, 10. All on. None missing. The rocking chair creaked on the boards my father had nailed himself. Salt air came through the porch screens. Stars were showing, not all of them yet, just the first ones, the bright enough ones that can push through the glow of the harbor lights. 10 lights. Same as every night. I closed my eyes and listened to the boards and the water and the ropes against the cleats, and I did not count anything else. There was nothing left to count. And that is Savannah's story. Now here is mine to you. If this story hit you somewhere real, if you have ever had someone smile at you while plotting against you, or if you have ever had a Frank Delgado or a Captain Ray in your corner when you needed it most, I want to hear from you. Drop a comment right now. Tell me your city, tell me what time it is, and tell me the one line from this story that stayed with you. Was it the compass? The coffee? The moment she walked back through that front door? If you watched all the way to the end, prove it by commenting, "She came back." Just those 3 words. I will know. And if this story reminded you that the people who prepare for the worst are the ones who protect the people they love the most, please share it. Send it to someone who needs to hear it today. You never know who needs this story right now. Like this video if you're glad she made it. Subscribe if you want to be here for the next one. And hit that notification bell because I promise you the next story is just as wild. I'll see you there.